One mechanic in Tarkov that we all seem to have forgotten about, mainly because it's so second nature to us at this point, is what kind of storage we want to take into a raid with us, and that comes in the form of backpacks. They are the cornerstone of how you carry things out of your raids. Years ago, there weren't that many different backpacks available in the game to use. Nowadays, in 2023, there are a whole host of different backpack options. Some are just reskins of already existing sizes, but for the most part, each backpack is unique enough to warrant having them in the game. However, one thing BSG has done with some of the backpacks is creating different internal dimensions in the backpacks, forcing the player to adjust how they're able to carry items. The Paratus backpack is the oldest example of the internals of a backpack not just being one large space of storage. It has many different grid sizes, and over the years, BSG has added more backpacks that follow this rule of having different grid sizes in the packs, which should become the new standard for most large backpacks going forward. Emphasis on large. Bringing a backpack is usually a go-to for many players because not having one in raid really limits how much loot you're able to actually carry. Even bringing just the smallest bag available can make such a massive difference when killing just a single scav. Granted, most scavs in the game will have a bag on them that can be taken when killed, so while not completely necessary, most players won't load into a raid without one. The size range of backpacks in this game is insanely large between the smallest and the biggest ones, going from a 3x2 grid internally all the way up to the massive 6x8 internal grid size. The Raid backpack, as it's called, takes the accolade for largest bag in the game, whilst the smallest bag goes to the humble sling bag. But even just that alone can make such a huge difference while in a raid. Either way, backpacks are an important angle to Tarkov and how you get loot out of the map, whether it's by bringing one in yourself or taking one off a dead individual. If you're really trying to collect loot, make money, or another player's gear, a backpack is vital to your success. And while the backpacks on offer have gotten larger and broader in terms of how much they can carry, there are 4 bags in the game currently that break the norm of how the inside of backpacks look. These are all interesting because instead of just having a square or rectangle that isn't obstructed by itself and you can just fill with loot to your heart's content, the 4 backpacks that require you to actually think about what you take out are very compelling. These 4 bags are the Paratus, the F4 Terminator, the G2 Gunslinger, and the Mechanism. Each of these bags have their own internal designs that differ from one another, but my personal favorite is definitely the Gunslinger. The actual design of the backpack is awesome looking. It's not so large that it feels unrealistic to walk around with like the couch, and the little flap on the back is a nice touch. The weight of the bag, at being just under 3 kilograms, puts it just out of the top 5 of heaviest bags, and the penalties whilst wearing aren't too bad either, with minus 4% movement speed, 1% turning speed, and 3% to ergonomics. These numbers were a lot worse in the past, but BSG has made attempts to reduce the cumbersomeness of backpacks, and at one point the numbers were removed entirely, but were reinstated at some point recently. But it's the internals of the backpack that we're the most interested in. It's divided up into 3 sections, which when you take a look at it, you kind of already know what you can take out in terms of players and gear and loot. It basically boils down to 1 armor or armored rig, 1 gun, and either a helmet or a set of headphones in the bag, which may put off people immediately because it's not all the loot. I want all the loot, you know? But seriously ask yourself, how often are you walking out of a raid with more than 1 gun or armor in your backpack? Not the one on your back, in the bag. As someone who runs mainly Barracoots and Scav backpacks, I'd personally say not very often. Yes, there are other bags that are larger and aren't divided up into sections, but what if those larger bags in the game all functioned like the Gunslinger or Paratus? How bad would that actually be? Now, this won't ever happen, of course, but let's take a moment and think about the implications of making the biggest bags in the game behave like these 4 bags currently do. I'd be generous and say from the tri-zip and below, these bags aren't affected by this hypothetical change, but anything with an internal size larger than the tri-zip would have its internals changed so that it's segmented up in some way. How each bag would be changed, I can't give specifics, but we could say that the minimum would be to be able to carry 1 full kit's worth of gear from a player. Anything after that would be extra spots that could fit miscellaneous items or smaller pieces of loot. The F4 Terminator has interesting internals, having room for multiple guns and not much more. Maybe a combination of these 2 bags would make sense for something like the Trooper 35 or the Couch Raid bag. Speaking of, while we're talking about hypothetical bag changes, let's address the main problem with some of these larger bags in the game. Availability. Putting this hypothetical aside for just a moment, the main issue with backpacks and how much people take out currently is how easily the bigger bags are to acquire right now. The variety that is simply purchasable is interesting, but it's not only which bags you can buy, but also the price of them. For years, the price of backpacks in Tarkov has always kind of made me scratch my head. Some are a little too cheap for what they offer, and others are way too expensive for what they do, and others are adequately priced for their purpose. It would make so much more sense if these 4 bags in the game that have sectioned up insides should technically be cheaper than all the other bags of equal sizes that are just normal squares, simply because they aren't as mindless to loot as normal bags. You need to think for a second about what you take out and how you organize it so you can get the most value out of it. The best example of this would be comparing the Gunslinger bag to the Trooper 35 bag. Both have the same internal size at 35 cells. The Gunslinger is almost twice as heavy as the Trooper 35, and the Gunslinger has slightly better stats while wearing it. Now let's look at the prices. Just over 56k rubles for the Trooper, and 62,000 rubles for the Gunslinger. Now, to be brutally honest, 6k rubles are literal pennies in the grand scheme of things, but because the Gunslinger is divided up, it would make more sense if these prices were swapped at the very least. Maybe make it even cheaper by just a little bit, and the Trooper just a little bit more expensive. Another way would be to make the Trooper barter only, like the Beta 2 or Attack 2 bags are currently. The Raid bag is almost like that as well, and the fact that it's using a lion statue as the barter option means that it's going to always cost at least 100k rubles to run. Or, if we don't want to go down the barter route and leave them up for raw purchase, then maybe that's when we start to mess with the internals of the bigger bags, and leave them alone if they're switched to barter only. Either way, the huge bags in this game are crazy strong, and if one or both were to ever actually get adjusted in the game, I would be fine with that. Backpacks, again, are something we rarely think about. We just grab whatever we have and load into a raid. And most of the time, if we kill someone that has a bigger bag, we swap to it. After all, we want all the loot, so it makes sense to switch. But what if we had to think about what we took out because all the backpacks on the ground are really big ones, but are segmented up? If you rolled your eyes at all throughout this conversation, I had asked you to go and try one of the 4 backpacks that are different than the rest. Who knows, you might actually find you enjoy using them, like I do. I'd run the Gunslinger almost exclusively if it just wasn't so damn expensive. But what are your thoughts on backpacks and how the largest options function? Thank you for taking the time out of your day to watch this video. This is just a conversation we're having, so be sure to leave your thoughts in the comments down below, and subscribe for more videos about the more afterthought aspects of Tarkov. I hope to see you in future ones.